Okay, so Hare Krishna everyone.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hope everyone enjoyed their celebration of Lord Nityananda's appearance, wherever, whatever city you are in, and that was a good festival for you. You may recall that 2 weeks ago, when we had our last Bhagavatam class, we were talking about Manu, Swayambhuva Manu, and his three kids. Does anybody remember the names of those three kids of Swayambhuva Manu?
Singas.
Sorry?
Parichita. King Parichit.
No. Manu's, Swayambhuva Manu's kid. So I'll give you one hint. One was the mother of Kapil Dev. That was the woman.
Devahuti.
Devahuti. So that's one. There were two brothers,
Priyavarta and
Uttanpad and
Tanpad.
Uttanpad and
Priyavarta.
Priyavrata. Absolutely right. So we have talked about Devahuti, her husband Kashyap Muni, and her son Kapil Dev. We talked about that in the third canto. And then we talked about Uttanpad, his wives Suniti and Surichi, his son. What was the son's name?
Dhruv.
Dhruva
Dhruv
Manu,
and
yes.
Uttam. And Uttam.
Uh-huh.
Other one is Uttam from the other wife.
Correct. Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely right. So Uttam and Dhruva. Dhruva is a little more famous,
Yeah.
and we talked about that. So now we are in the fifth canto, and we'll discuss Priyavrat, the second son,
Yeah.
and his dynasty. So we discussed Dhruv Maharaj's dynasty also. We talked about the Prachetas. We talked about King Prachin Barhi. So that was the dynasty of Dhruv Maharaj. So who was like in the dynasty of Uttanpad. So now the other brother, Priyavrat. So we'll talk about him and his dynasty. That's the fifth canto. Before I do that, any questions? No? Okay. All right. Hare Krishna Gautam.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
How are you, beta?
Good, how are you?
Very good, thanks. Oh, I see Sunana Mataji there as well. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Oh, Madhu Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Dhanvat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam. Okay, so if there are no questions, we'll get started with fifth canto. And you may recall actually from the third canto that Narad Muni had instructed Priyavrat about the whole philosophy about the mission of purpose of human life, which is by the way self-realization and go back to Godhead. And he was in touch with Priyavrat quite a bit. So as a result, Priyavrata was constantly engaged in performing devotional service to the Lord. And actually he moved away from the palace. He went to a place called Gandhamadan Hill. And he was there, but when Dhruv Maharaj had left this planet, Swayambhuva Manu asked Priyavrat Maharaj to take over the kingdom. Take over the kingdom and that become the king. But Priyavrat was very, very hesitant. Can you guess why? It's just a wild guess why Priyavrat would be hesitating or hesitated to accept the role of the king? Any guesses? Why was
He was more into the devotional service.
Yes.
Because Maya is so strong, maybe he doesn't want to get caught in that.
Yeah, that's also true. So basically, he
In the
wanted to stay
association
engaged.
of-
Oh, sorry, Sonam, go ahead.
I was just saying that in the association of Narad Muni, who's a pure Vaishnava, he must have developed detachment. Maybe that's why.
Yes, that's also correct. That is also very true. So yeah, he was detached because of the association with Narad Muni, And frankly, he did not want to interrupt or diminish his devotional service, which he thought it would be if he becomes the king and he might get materially attached. All those things, not good for him. So he was hesitating. And actually, he was in a very nice way, he was saying no to his father, Manu. So as the discussion was going on, Lord Brahma showed up, and he went to where Priyavrat was sitting with his father Manu and his spiritual master Narad Muni. And Narad Muni was basically preaching the two of them. And Lord Brahma showed up there again at Gandhamadhan Hill where Priyavrat was living. And, of course, when Lord Brahma showed up, everybody got up, they offered their obeisances and sang prayers of praise, which is the etiquette to Lord Brahma. And then after everybody settled down, Lord Brahma said to Priyavrata that, look, you should understand something. The whole system of Varnashram was created by the Lord. Anybody can remember the verse from Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, I created the Varnashram system?
Chaturvana Maya System Guna Karma Vipakas.
Chaturvida Bhajante Ma.
No, he's right. Adi Sham Prabhu is right.
Addition. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Chaturvanya Maya system, Guna Karma Vibhaga.
Guna Karam Vibhagasya.
Very good. Yes. So basically, that's where Krishna is saying that I have created this system. It's a very scientific system, and the whole society is divided into 4 varnas, which is, you can use the word caste if you like, and the 4 statuses, which is like sannyas, vanprastha, grihastha, and brahmachari, according to the activities and qualities of the person. So Lord Brahma is basically repeating that system has been created by Krishna for a reason, and that is that we must conduct our duties of Varnashram by our nature. Like it's not a choice; we are forced to do that by our nature. And that again reminds me of another verse from Bhagavad Gita, which is chapter 3, text 27, and that says, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankar vimuhdhatma karta aham iti manyate. The first line is more relevant here, which says that all of us are forced to act by the modes of material nature. In other words, we are forced to act by our nature. And so Lord Brahma is giving a very nice example here. He's saying all of us must carry out our duties of Varnashram Dharma, just like the bulls are obliged to move according to the directions of the driver, pulling on the ropes knotted to their noses. Now try to imagine.
Prabhuji, I'm sorry, can you please repeat this?
Of course. Lord Brahma is saying that all of us are forced to act according to our Varnashram, which means our nature, and which means our modes of material nature, just like a bull who's pulled in either direction, left or right, by the driver simply by pulling the rope that's been knotted through his nose, through his nostrils. Does it make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Perfect sense.
So I was just saying, sorry, Mahajan Prabhu?
Perfect sense. Prabhu.
Oh, thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. So I was just saying that just imagine a rope through your nostrils and somebody's pulling it. How painful that would be. And therefore, to avoid the pain, you will immediately move to whichever direction whoever is pulling that rope. So Lord Brahma is saying to Priyavrat that we are all forced to move or obliged to move according to our nature, which is the Varnashram Dharma. So what's he really saying? What is he really saying? It's the same thing that Krishna was telling Arjuna. He was saying, you're a Kshatriya. Your nature is to rule. Your nature is to govern. Your nature is to administer. And of course, to fight. So I mean, you can do all you want, hide here in the Gandhamadhan hill, and perform all the devotional service, but your nature doesn't change. So therefore, you should take that role. And he says, yeah, I know you're worried about becoming attached to material things. So he says, conquer your six senses. So I'm going to ask you again, what are the six senses that's referring to?
Sixth one is the mind. Here,
Yes. Yeah, correct.
sixth one is the mind.
Water, air, fire,
No, Mataji, no.
Ears,
Senses.
nose, mouth,
feel,
Sorry?
eyes, no, touching,
I'm sorry.
hearing, touching,
Hearings,
hearing,
Smell, touch.
touching, taste.
smelling, looking.
Eyes, ears, and tongue, Prabhuji.
Yeah, no, I'm shaking my head. That means no. So you're talking about sense objects or you're talking about the working senses. But here, six senses refer to knowledge gathering senses. What are the knowledge gathering senses? Ears, nose,
eyes,
eyes,
Smelling,
mouth,
looking.
mouth,
mm,
Feel.
hands, touch, feel,
Touch.
feel.
skin. Basically, skin, yes. These are
Skin.
the knowledge gathering senses, and mind is the sixth sense.
Sixth.
So he says, control these six senses. And you control them by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. It's very simple. It's very simple. And he said, with that, you accept material enjoyment because this is the order of the Lord. The Lord wants you to become the king. And he said that by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, you will always be liberated from material association and carry out the Lord's order. So he's basically saying, even though you are in the, or you will be in the middle of what you could call self-enjoyment because of material things, but you'll still be renounced if you take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. So there are two types of renunciations that Rupa Goswami talks about. Anybody can tell me what they are? The two types of renunciation. Yes. And? So my wife is answering the question. She's saying Yukta Vairagya, which means engaged renunciation, and Phalgu Vairagya, which is artificial renunciation. So Yukta Vairagya or engaged renunciation is that you are in the middle of all these material activities. You may be even be appearing to be enjoying your material activities, but you're not attached to them. So the verse in Nectar of Devotion is Anasaktasya Vishyan Yatharaham Upayunjata Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagyam Uchyate. It says that you can be in the middle of material things, but you deal with them only to the degree necessary. Therefore, you don't become attached to them. So in other words, for example, we could be doing our job, but not attached to it. We could be doing other material things because we live in the material world, but deal with them only as much as necessary. Rest of the time is with Krishna. And even when we're doing those things, we're doing those things as if they're the plan of Krishna. Krishna's instructions to us to do this, so you're doing it. Okay? So that's what Lord Brahma is talking about here. That if you take shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, then you will not become attached. There's another wonderful verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, the first canto, which says, Vasudeva Bhagavate Bhakti Yogayon Prayojita Janayati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayat Ahatukam, which says that if you perform the devotional service to the Lord Vasudeva, then renunciation comes automatically. You don't have to have a separate process or endeavor to do that. So Lord Brahma is basically assuring him that because the Lord wants it, because your father and your grandfather, me, is telling you to do it, you're safe. So go ahead and accept it. Okay? Quite convincing. I thought it was quite convincing. Okay, all right. So then Priyavrata accepted his grandfather's orders. And actually, he carried out his orders with great respect. He became the king, and what do you say? Executed the responsibility for as a king very, very well, extremely well. And by the way, do you know who he was the king of? Like what territory? Any ideas? I'm sorry,
Radha Manish.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Prabhuji, you said he's taking over after Dhruv Maharaj has left. So the kingdom of Dhruv Maharaj?
Correct. So how big was that? What was the territory like?
No idea.
It was the whole universe. It was not just one country, one planet. It was the whole universe. So he was the king of the whole universe. So basically, he had the responsibility for maintaining and protecting the entire universe, all the planets in the universe. And he did that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but did Dhruv Maharaj, because I can think of the Dhruvaloka with Dhruv Maharaj, so he first ruled the entire universe and then he went to his own abode or house?
Correct. Correct. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question. I am still not in sync with that ox with rope nostril example. I don't know what the rope represents here, because I think ox is a human being. I mean, in the analogy. What's the rope?
The rope
You have to
represents the
go- you
modes
have
of
to
material
go to
nature. I'm sorry, Prabhu? Mahajan Prabhu?
She has to go to a farmer to know that.
So the rope represents the modes of material nature.
The three modes.
The three modes. So they are the ones that are pulling at your nose and making you go. So that's why I quoted verse 27 from chapter 3, Bhagavad Gita, Prakritir Kriya Manani, because it's your nature, it's your modes of material nature that are forcing you to act in a certain way. We are being a fool if we say we are the doers. Krishna is saying, no, you're not. It's the modes of material nature that are making you do it.
Yeah.
So saying that's the rope that's referring to.
Understood, Prabhuji.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Anybody else? Actually, this is a very important concept.
I have a question.
Rampriya Prabhu, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, Krishna said about varnashrams, right? The 4 varnashrams, and it depends on the nature of work that people do, right? So if a person start thinking, okay, let's say if a person is a kshatriya, let's say Arjuna is a kshatriya, in between in his life he thought to go towards the devotional service and change the nature of work. Accordingly, the kshatriya can become the brahmana also, right? Because the nature of the work might get changed in between of the life also.
So be very careful. When you say devotional service, that is above the varnashram system. Varnashram system is material. Devotional service is spiritual. So anybody, Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Brahman, anybody can become a devotee, a Vaishnava. It has nothing to do with your modes of material nature. It's not material. Okay? Now, I just want to add that there are some examples, not many, of where a Kshatriya became a Brahmin and a Brahmin became a Kshatriya. So Parashuram was a Brahmin. He became a Kshatriya. He actually killed Kshatriyas 21 times on the entire earth. And Vishwamitra was a Kshatriya and he became a Brahmin, became a Rajarshi. But there are very exceptional situations. The 2 verses in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, 335 and 1848, I think. Krishna says, do your occupational duty, even if it's done faultily. But don't do somebody else's occupational duties, even if you're doing it perfectly, because it's very dangerous. So you can check it out, 335. And basically same verse is repeated again. There's only 2 verses that are repeated in Bhagavad Gita. This is one of them. Okay? Ramprakash, did I answer your question?
Yeah, Prabhu. Actually, there was some misunderstanding. I was thinking, okay, when the nature of the work changes,
Okay,
accordingly it has to change. Yeah.
sure. Okay. Twinkle, you were asking?
Yes, Hare Krishna Babuji.
Hare Krishna.
I wanted to ask you if you could explain the Yukta Vairagya and Phalgu Vairagya once again.
Yeah, Yukta. Yukta means joint or engaged, and Phalgu means artificial. So Yukta Vairagya is when you're doing all the material things just like anybody else, but you're not attached to the results or the activities. You're doing it as your occupational duty in an objective way. So that's why I give the example, you might be working, but you're doing it as a devotee because Krishna wants you to do it. Phalgu Vairagya, on the other hand, is artificially renouncing things that can be used in the service of Krishna. So, for example, saying, no, don't give me any money. No, that's material and that'll get me attached to material world. Don't give it to me. That is Phalgu Vairagya. Because you can take the money and engage it in the service of Krishna. Like, did Prabhupada ever say no to money? He collected millions of dollars, right? But not a penny for himself. So that's all right. That is Yukta Vairagya. I'll give you an example of a Phalgu Vairagya in our temple. This, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe more. In our temple, when we offer flowers, then flowers are given to the devotees in the congregation and they go around letting everybody else smell the flower because mercy. So I was doing that one day and there was a girl, maybe 19, 20 years old girl. So I gave it to her to smell and she said no. And I said, why? She said, no, that's self-gratification, and refused to take the flower. So that is artificial. Okay? Okay, I mean, you could say smelling a flower may be self-gratification, but not when it is offered to Krishna, because now it's mercy of Krishna. Okay? Does that make it a little more clear?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Sure.
Prabhuji, what are the English terms for both type of renunciation? It will be easier. For us to-
Engaged renunciation and artificial renunciation.
Yukta Vairagya is engaged renunciation.
Yeah, so you engage in activities, material activities.
But not. Okay, fine. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Sure. Anybody else?
Prabhu, I have a question.
हाँ बेटा बोलो.
So, can Yukta Vairagya be also Nishkam Karma?
Yes, it can.
Because it's almost similar, right? Because you're doing something without any expectation.
Well, I'm hesitating because there could be expectations, but you use the expectations in the service of Krishna, and therefore it's Yukta Vairagya.
Okay.
Right? So, I mean, it's very, very close, very similar.
Right.
But there may be some subtle differences.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pidashi, what about Yukta Vairagya? I know that, but Yukta Vairagya is Vairagya means Bhakti. We can use in Bhakti. Ki Vairagya Yukta Bhakti.
No.
No?
Bhakti automatically leads to Vairagya.
Okay.
Pure devotion service is renunciation.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because you're not interested in anything material.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, let's move on then.
When Krishna says that do your karma, but offer the results to me or don't expect for the results, does he mean Yukta Vairagya?
No, that is more of what Bhadra Krishna Prabhu was talking about. That's like offer the results to me. That's like become Nishkam.
So, for example, if somebody is, working for, if we are working and whatever salary we are getting, we are using that for the service of Krishna. Is that not the similar thing that we are doing the job, but we are engaging that?
It's similar thing, but not necessarily the same thing. So, for example, I'm earning my money and I'll offer my money to Krishna, is not pure devotional service. It's more of karma yoga, right? Whereas engaged renunciation can be pure devotional service, right?
So that means, Prabhu, when you're saying pure devotional services, means you're not doing any material activity, you're only doing spiritual activity.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
I'm not saying that at all. Like so many associates of Lord Chaitanya were leading material life also, like Rai Ramanand. Who can be more pure devotee than him? And what was his job? He was governor of Madras. Right? King Prataparudra, he was the king of Orissa. King Pundarik Vidyanidhi, he was also a king. So many examples, but they were pure devotees. But that's where engaged renunciation comes in. They were all engaged renunciation.
So the difference is very fine.
That's what I'm saying. It's similar, but it's not the same. Okay, let's move on, otherwise I will get really late. Okay. Excuse me. So where was I? Yeah, so Priyavrat accepted the order and started to perform his duties as a king, and he got married to a woman by the name of Barishmati, which kind of, pricked my ears up, because Barishmati was also the name of the king Prachin Barhi, who was the father of the Prachetas. But anyway, in that case, the name of a man, here's the name of a woman. She was the daughter of Vishwakarma. And so with her, he had 10 sons and a daughter. Now, here's something very interesting. 3 of his 10 sons became pure devotees and spent their life as brahmacharis. So this is the 3 sons of a king. Okay. And then he had another wife with whom he had 3 sons. These 3 sons actually later on became Manus. You can imagine the long life they had. So the Uttam, not the same Uttam as Dhruv's brother. Uttam, Tamas and Ravat. All 3 became Manu, one after the other. So now I have a question. Who's the current Manu? Anybody knows? I'm sorry? Who's the current Manu?
Vaivasvata.
Yes, thank you. Nandkumar Prabhu. Vaivasvat Manu is the son of Vivaswan, who's sun god. Hence the name Vaivasvat. So he's the current Guru, he's the 7th Manu. Right? So these 3 became like 3rd, 4th and 5th Manus. Anyway. So one time what happened was that Priyavrat had a very interesting realization. Not self-realization, but a realization that, whenever sun is on one side of the whatever axis, it's daylight there. But on the other side, it's night. And he said, this is not good. He says, I want daytime even where there is night. Now, how do you do that? Well, he was so powerful, he had a chariot which was very, very effulgent. So he started to follow the orbit of the sun on his chariot. And basically the distance was enough that he stayed on the other side of where the sun was. So where it should have been night, now it became day there also. So where the sun was, the side where the sun was daytime. And now because where his chariot was, there was daytime as well. And I guess he got that kind of power by simply serving the Lord. Anyway, so as his chariot followed the orbit of the sun, the rims of the chariot wheels created impressions that later became 7 oceans, dividing the whole planetary system known as Bhumandal into 7 islands. Now, these oceans were very interesting. Typically, what do you think in terms of the taste of the water of an ocean?
Salty.
Salty. Well, these 7 oceans
Was
had
sweet.
different contents, each one of them. So, of course, there was salty water, then there was sugar cane juice, then there was liquor, clarified butter, ghee, milk, yogurt, and sweet water. So, 7 different oceans, 7 different contents.
Taste.
So he basically gave his other 7 sons the one island each to rule, and his daughter. Remember, I said one daughter. She got married to Shukracharya. Who was Shukracharya?
Rakshasa Guru.
Not Mayavadi Guru. But
Rakshasa Guru.
yes, demons spiritual master, including Bali.
Demons.
Yes. So okay, we'll talk about more detail when we talk about King Yayati later on. Anyway, so Priyavrit, this boggles my mind. Priyavrit ruled for 100 million years.
Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
100 millions.
100 million years. Like, I'll get bored. But anyway, he did that for 100 million years. And enjoyed his life with his wife. And he actually got very attached to his wife. But then he started thinking that, look, man, this is nuts. Where was I before I took all this? I was such a devotee and serving the Lord. And now somehow or the other, I've become entangled in but in material activities. And he said, my dear Lord, this is your grace that I'm finally coming back to my senses. And so he divided all his property among his sons, gave up everything, including his wife, with whom he had such a great time, and so much sense gratification. He just gave it all up, along with his kingdom, and he returned to the path of devotional service. So one of his sons, the eldest son was, what was his name? Agnidhar. Agnidhar had 9 sons. The eldest one was Nabhi, that we'll talk about. Okay, so before I go further, any questions, comments? I hope it's not too confusing. Okay.
Prabhuji.
Cinema Anati, boliye.
Yeah, I have a question. What I have read about Prerit, that he was very into the devotional service, and there's a lot of, conversation between Brahma and him, and Brahmaji was trying to, convince him that he should take up the kingdom, and he was convincing Brahmaji why he should not take the kingdom and why he should not become the king. He was that much into the devotional service. Now, from that level to coming to this level where he is doing all these activities, he was totally out of that devotional service, or what was?
No, he never got totally out of devotional service, but was definitely diminished because of his responsibilities. Imagine having to be the ruler of entire universe. So there were so many non-devotional activities. But to his credit, and by Krishna's mercy, he never forgot, that he's a devotee. And finally he said, enough, I need to go back to my devotional service. So imagine giving up, and this is where engaged renunciation comes in. Imagine giving up your own kingdom. Imagine giving up your wife and your children and all those material comforts and all the enjoyment he was having. Give it all up. So only a devotee can do that. It's not easy.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you.
Sure. Okay. So the son, which is the grandson of Priyavrat, Nabhi, he underwent very severe austerities and penances, and he did many fire sacrifices through which he worshipped Lord Vishnu, but he had a desire. He did all this with a desire to have a son. So finally the Lord appeared on one of his fire sacrifices, and of course King Nabhi offered beautiful prayers and said, my dear Lord, I want to have a son like you. So the Lord said, I'm so pleased by your sacrifices. I'll agree to become your son. And then he disappeared. Later on, the Lord came back. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have came back. He appeared as the son of King Nabhi's wife, whose name was Meru Devi, and his name became Rishabdev. Now, anybody knows the name? The meaning of the word Rishab? Anyone? It means the best or the supreme. So, such an appropriate name for the Lord. Okay? So, eventually, time goes on. King Nabhi also retired from his family life, and he gave the kingdom to his son, Rishabdev. And Rishabdev was living, true to his name, the best and the supreme. And everybody was, everybody being the subjects of the kingdom were totally in love with him. And he had so much power that once there was no rain for a long time. So typically, Indra is in charge of rain. And Rishabdev said, I don't want to wait for him. I don't care. I'll do it myself. And he produced so much rain for his kingdom that everybody was satisfied. By the way, at that time, the name of his kingdom was Ajnab. Very soon, and we'll discuss that tonight, the name of that place changed. Can you anticipate what that might have been? It's a very familiar name. 95% of them, of us on this call, are from there.
Bharat. Give some hint.
Yes, Bharat. So I don't know what your clue was, but anyway, so we'll talk about how that happened. Anyway, so Rishabdev also got married to a woman by the name of Jayanti. Actually, she was the daughter of Indra, and he had 100 sons.
Oh.
They had money and the facilities. Anyway, the eldest of them was named Bharat. The eldest son of Rishabdev was Bharat, after whom this whole planet is named Bharat Varsha. Anyway, and then, so remember I said 100 sons? The eldest was Bharat, but 9 of his sons, 9 of the 100, became, I guess the best word I can think of is mendicant preachers. So they were traveling, preaching. And they had no desire to stay in the kingdom or enjoy the kingdom or be the royal family. They became preachers. They became Vaishnavas. Very famous, they're known as Nav Yogendras. You may have heard the name, Nav Yogendras. And we'll discuss them in Canto 11 in great detail when they talk to King Nimi. Anyway, Lord Rishabdev also performed 105 sacrifices and satisfied Lord Vishnu in every respect you can imagine. So once he was touring the whole world, and he reached a place, I'm talking about Rishabdev now, reached a place which was known as Brahmavarta. And there was a great conference going on. The Brahmins were discussing various topics. So Lord Rishabdev joined that, and then separately he got all his sons, I guess under a tree, and gave them a lecture, a class. His sons were already very well behaved. They were devotees. They were very well qualified, in every respect, and they could rule the world perfectly. But he gave them, a class anyway, and that class became famous as Rishabdev's teachings. So because I didn't think I could remember them, so I put them on the screen. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to share the screen and then put it there. Give me 1 second.
we can see it.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, so there's 7 of them that will take. Does anybody want to read this? Just take turns. One person read this.
Yeah, we can do.
Yes, Prabhu, we can do.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
A human being should not work hard like hawks and dogs for sense gratification, because human life is meant for the revival of our relationship with the Supreme Lord.
Right. So, wonderful teaching. He's basically saying, don't waste your time trying to earn money and other things for your sense gratification, because you got a human birth. Don't waste it. The purpose of human birth is to revive your relationship with the God, with the Lord. So what is that relationship? Anybody?
Service to God,
Yes. So
servant.
yes, we are the servants. So that's the relationship. He is the master, we are the servants. We have forgotten that relationship. So do that. And the other part of that is in a loving way, in an unmotivated, means you serve him without any material motivation. Right? So actually, as I was looking at them, I kept thinking of a book by Rupa Goswami. It is called Nectar of Instruction. I hope most of you have either read it or at least heard about it. So this is like verse number 2 from that book. Atyahara pe asascha, pajalpa niyamagraha, tinsangascha laulyascha, shadbhi bhakti vinashyati. So that was saying that if you over endeavor for material things, you lose your devotion service. So this they were saying basically the same thing. Okay, somebody read the next one.
The doors of liberations are open to one who takes shelter of a devotee and serve him. On the contrary, those attached to women and sense gratifications becomes entangled in the material world, and the path to hell is open for them.
Right. So I mean, very clear message. Again, goes back to the same verse that I just quoted from Nectar of Instruction. They also says, give up the association of materialistic people. So he's saying the same thing. If you associate with materialistic people who are into women and other things, then you're basically opening the door for hell for yourself. On the contrary, if you take shelter of a devotee and serve him, then the path to liberation is open for you. Mat seva ahurdwaram, basically saying in that verse that the doors are open, doors of liberation are open to you. You serve a pure devotee. And there are many examples in our Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures about that. Narad Muni being one example. Okay, number 3. Somebody else, please.
Can I read it, Prabhuji?
Please, of course.
People interested in Krishna consciousness do not like to do anything not related to Krishna, like mingling with karmis. They collect only enough money to keep the body and soul together. They understand that endeavor for sense gratification is a useless waste of time.
Right. So once again, the idea is that if it's not for Krishna, it's for Maya. That will always get you into trouble. Get you entangled in the material world. You keep coming down, up and down, up and down for eternity. But note that it's not saying don't do anything. Saying, yeah, you have to collect money, so do it, earn the money. But after a certain amount, you don't need more, so don't waste your time earning more than you need. This is the same thing we were talking about, anasakta sivishyan, yatharam upajnita. Only as much as necessary, you do that. Rest of the time, you try to serve Krishna and Krishna's devotees. Because if you don't, you're simply wasting your time. So this human birth is very rare, extremely rare, and if you waste it in sense gratification, then you have lived no better than animals And what a complete waste of opportunity that is. Okay, number 4, somebody else? Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. There you go.
Should I do it?
Anyone, please.
One can become self-realized by persistently serving Krishna for his satisfaction.
So this is
For
for,
his satisfaction.
this is for Krishna's satisfaction, not our. So basically, what does self-realized mean?
Know himself. To know ourselves. Difference between my body and self.
To realize our eternal relationship with Krishna.
Right. So we are spirit soul, and in that capacity, we are simply servants of Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is self-realization. Who are we? What our relationship with Krishna is, and who is Krishna? That is self-realization. Okay. Number 5. Somebody else?
Accept an advanced devotee as your spiritual master and inquire philosophical truth from him. Listen to the discussion about Srila Prabhu.
Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Supreme Personality of Godhead, and always associate with the devotees. Have faith in revealed scriptures. Okay.
Yes. So why should we have faith in revealed scriptures?
If you don't have the faith, you will not accept anything.
Right.
You should have faith.
Basically, yeah, because the whole thing is faith-based. There's no question about it. It may be a science, but still it's faith-based. Okay, yeah. So he's saying you have to have faith, and you have to have a spiritual master. But why do you need a spiritual master? To have your status, or somebody who can give you material benedictions, become rich, become powerful? No. And how would you like to go to your spiritual master and say, so which stock should I invest in? That's not what a spiritual master is for.
Yeah.
They're for philosophical inquiries. You need to understand the philosophical truth from him, not about the stock market or job market or whatever, anything material. So saying, so have an advanced devotee as your spiritual master and inquire. Krishna says the same thing in Bhagavad Gita 4:34, right? Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. Updekshanti te jnanam jnananas tattva darshana. The advanced devotee has seen the truth. He'll impart that truth to you if you ask proper questions in a proper way and serve him. And that's what removes your doubts and makes you steady in your devotional service. So that's the message that is given. Number 6, somebody else, please.
Anyone who cannot deliver an other person by instructing him in devotional service should not become a spiritual master, a father, mother, demigod, or husband.
Thank you, Prabhu. Somebody was trying to ask a question?
No, I was just trying to read it.
Okay.
I'll read the next one.
No worries, read the next one. Okay, so he's saying that, don't become a spiritual master. Don't become a father. Don't become a mother. Don't become a demigod or a husband if you cannot deliver the person in your charge to Krishna. If you cannot instruct him in devotional service, if you cannot encourage him to become a pure devotee, if you cannot deliver him from this material world, don't become any of this. The spiritual master, the father, mother, demigod, or a husband. It's a huge responsibility. Don't take it lightly. Okay. Mataji, go ahead. Number 7.
Yeah. The Lord derives more pleasure from the food offered through the mouth of the Brahmins than from the food offered in a fire sacrifice.
Right. So actually, what do we, like I'm talking about us on this call and other devotees in this ISKCON, what do we call fire sacrifice? What activity do we call
Havan.
Ritual.
Pious activity.
No, sorry. Let me rephrase my question.
Havan.
Of course, fire sacrifice is yajna. But we have a different kind of yajna. Sankirtan yajna, that's right. So, chanting the holy name of the Lord is the yajna that we do. We don't do Havan so much. I mean, we do every once in a while, but on a daily basis, we do Sankirtan yajna. Right? So here, Rishabdev is referring to the fire sacrifice, the Havan that we were calling, where we offer oblations. And he says, that's also meant for me, but somehow I don't enjoy that as much as I enjoy when that same thing is given to devotees of mine.
Devotees of.
So in other words, feeding the devotees is an activity that really pleases the Lord.
More pleasure.
Right? So again, going back to the letter of instruction, verse number 4. Dadati pratigrihanati guhyam akati prachati bhunjate bhojate cha shadvidha priti lakshanam. That 2 of the 6 characteristics of good devotee relationships are that you feed them prasadam and eat prasadam in their house. So Krishna is saying the same thing, that when you feed a devotee, it's very pleasing to me. Okay? Any questions? Okay, then I'm going to stop sharing. Alright, so those were, or those are known as the teachings of Lord Rishabdev. Okay, alright. So then, then after that, what happens is that Rishabdev also said, okay, enough. I've done my time. I don't want to be king anymore. I need to focus on my devotional service. So, then as the custom was, he called his eldest son, who was Bharat, and he enthroned him on the royal seat. And then something very interesting happened. That he stayed at home, but he started living like a madman, like no clothes, disheveled hair, no shower for a long time, and all those kind of things. And then after some time, he left home, and he went on a world tour. But he went on a tour like an avadhuta, which basically means somebody who acts like a blind, deaf and dumb person, like a madman. So he just took that role and he started traveling. People, as you know, are very cruel. So wherever he traveled and they saw him like this, so people were threatening him, they were beating him, some people would even urinate upon him, some people will spit upon him, all sorts of bad people. They were mistreating him like that. Some people, especially children, they threw stones at him. Some people threw dust at him. Some people threw stool at him. And all sorts of mistreatment that he was getting. A lot of people called him all sorts of bad names and gave him all sorts of trouble that you can imagine. But he didn't care. He didn't care about any of this. So I'm going to ask you, can you guess why he didn't care about any of this? All these insults and the beatings.
He was in Avdhuta state.
I'm sorry?
He was like in, how should I say, he was in Avdhuta state.
Okay, you'll have to elaborate.
He was immersed in Krishna's.
So he was not feeling anything.
So, okay, you're all very close, but I want to hear one specific sentence. So, yes, he was very close.
Because he was not really concerned about the body.
Yes, exactly right. He understood that he's not this body.
Yeah.
And all these insults and beatings, etc., are meant for the body. So I'm not this body, so I'm just detached. Do whatever you want. And as you said, his mind was totally focused on Krishna, so none of this bothered him. Okay? Now, excuse me.
हरे कृष्णा पिताश्री
हाँ जी
पिताजी आपने जैसा भी एक यू रिपीट श्लोक Can you repeat it? Can you explain just little bit? Is dadati prati grihnati gvatam akhyati prachati. Can you just little bit explain it, please?
Okay. So she's talking about the verse I quoted from Nectar of Instruction, which talks about the 6 loving relationships among the devotees. So the first 2 are dadati pratigrihanati, which means give gift, but accept gift also. So what's the best gift you can give to somebody?
Love.
Okay, what else?
Knowledge.
Spiritual path. Holy
Spiritual
spiritual knowledge.
Yes, spiritual knowledge, that's
Holy
correct.
name.
So the spiritual books,
Association.
association, all those kinds of gifts, yes. So those are the best gifts. And same thing, we accept that from other devotees as well. So dadati pratigranati. Then guhyam akhati, which means being able to share your mind, confidential issues with somebody. Prachati means ask questions. So give gift, accept gift, share your mind, ask questions. That's 4. And then bhunjate bhojiyate cha. Feed prasadam, honor prasadam. Those are the 6 loving exchanges between the devotees. Okay, so next instruction, verse number 4, discusses that.
Yes. Thank you, Pitashiri. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much.
You're welcome. Okay, any other questions? All right. So later on, he became tired of, or he got tired of traveling. So he stayed in one place and he laid down basically, like a python. What does python do? Just sits there wherever, waits for something to come so he can eat. So he laid down there, and basically same place, same spot. He ate and he drank and he did his business, and rolled in it basically. So other people won't come. But the thing that's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam is that his stool and urine was so aromatic that they filled 80 miles of countryside with pleasant fragrance. I guess he was God, so he could do that. Anyway, so once he traveled to South India, and he went to a place, I don't know if I can remember the name, Kuttakachal. And as he was staying there, suddenly there was a forest fire that burned the entire forest, and his body was consumed in that forest as well. That was the end of him. Now, before Lord Rishabdev started traveling, he had made his son the emperor of the world, right? King Bharat. So as was the custom, King Bharat also performed lots of fire sacrifices and thus satisfied Lord Krishna. He constantly had Lord Krishna in his heart. He married a woman by the name of Jani. Somebody's doing dishes. Mute everybody. Okay. He married a girl by the name of Panchajani, and with her he had 5 sons. And he also ruled for 10 million years. And after 10 million years, he said, okay, enough. So he divided his kingdom to these 5 sons and left home for a place called Pula Ashram, which is in Haridwar. And there he ate vegetables and fruits and worshipped Lord Vasudeva, offering him all sorts of things, whatever was available in the forest, I guess. And he increased his devotion towards Lord Vasudeva. And he became a highly advanced spiritual person. So advanced that he was actually exhibiting the Ashtasattvic transformations. It's called in Sanskrit Ashtavikars. Which are the symptoms of ecstasy. Anybody can give me an example of symptoms of ecstasy? Bodily manifestation?
Hair standing on end.
Yeah. So hair standing on end, crying, laughing. Sorry, Sonam? Shivering, yes. Trembling of the body parts, fainting, all those kind of things. So he was doing all that. Excuse me. And he was chanting the Gayatri mantras to worship the Lord. And this was going on for a long time. Then Krishna's plan, one day he was sitting there by the river Gandaki, and he was chanting his Gayatri mantra, and he saw a deer which was very obviously pregnant. He came to the same river where he was sitting to drink water. As she was drinking water, suddenly King Bharat heard a thundering roar of a lion. That roar frightened the deer so much that the deer jumped into the water, the river that is, and started crossing it. But as he was trying to cross it, halfway through, the deer gave birth to a calf. And then the deer kept swimming, went to the other side, and turned back to see how she could get back her calf, but she died. She was so scared in the delivery process. She couldn't take this anymore, the stress, and she died right away. Maharaj Bharat was looking at this poor old, newborn deer who was struggling to stay afloat on the river. So he got a lot of compassion for him. He went and rescued this motherless calf from the water. He took it to his ashram and started to care for it very affectionately. And so affectionate that soon he started thinking that this helpless young deer, she or he, whatever, has lost all his relatives and friends, and he has now taken shelter of me. He doesn't know anyone but me. And I have become his father, his mother, and brother, and any relative. So I'm everything for him. He has full faith in me. He doesn't know anybody but me. Therefore, I should raise, protect, fondle, and gratify this deer. This is my duty now as a parent figure, or as everything figure actually. And he said, look, I'm a former king. I cannot neglect anyone who's taken shelter of me. And this deer has taken shelter of me, so I cannot neglect it. Even though this deer is disturbing my spiritual life. But I cannot neglect a person, a helpless person who's taken my shelter. And he says, neglecting would be great fault. So I'm going to pause here for a second. I'm going to ask you to explain to me what was the fault in his logic.
It was. Please go ahead, Mataji.
Mataji, please go ahead.
It's okay, Mataji. Go ahead, please.
I love the devotees.
Anyways, I don't know, but I was just going to try, because we are always asked to, as Maharaj always says in the lecture, that we should renounce the things which are not favorable for our bhakti, and we should accept the things which are favorable for our bhakti. So I think out of compassion, he accepted what was not favorable for his bhakti.
Okay, yes. Let's talk about the logic he was using, why he must do what he's doing.
Prabhuji, before that, I had a question before I forget that.
No, but let's finish this first.
Okay.
You can write down your question so you won't forget. Nana Mataji, you were saying?
Almost same, Prabhuji, what Sona Mataji said. Like it was, he was accepting it, and he was trying to convince himself that it's more than his spiritual life, which was not the case. Some hindrance is coming in the spiritual life, and he was giving it more important than his own spiritual devotional service.
Okay.
One thing that, and second thing, he was also alone, so there was no association with him to correct him on the devotional service, like what he is doing wrong and what is right to Bharat Maharaj.
So remember, you're saying I'm his only shelter, I'm his only protection, right? Rukmini Sudha, you were going to say something?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Go ahead.
He was thinking like only he was thinking that he is the maintainer of that calf. He forgot that Krishna is the ultimate maintainer of everyone.
Correct. Maintainer, protector, etc. Yeah, everybody is Krishna's responsibility, not ours. Okay. Vallabhari Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji, the same thing that he thought that that calf is dependent on him, and he forgot that Krishna takes care of the entire world from an ant to elephant to everyone's needs.
Correct. Correct. Thank you. If you don't mind, just turn your video on when you ask a question or speak. Okay?
Yes, Prabhuji. I sit in a such. I can definitely do that.
Thank you, Prabhu. No worries. No worries. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? The question has been answered, but anybody else? Okay, Sonam, I don't want to forget your question, so go ahead.
Prabhuji, you said that he went to Haridwar, but then you talked about the Gandaki River. So Gandaki River is in Nepal. So
Yeah, you know what? I took it directly from Srimad Bhagavatam, but I had the same question, like how did Gandaki River get to Haridwar? So only thing I can think of is that maybe he traveled from Haridwar to Nepal somewhere. That's the only thing I can think of. But it is definitely Srimad Bhagavatam.
thank you.
Sure. Yes. Damodar Charan Prabhu, go ahead.
Yes, Prabhu, he actually did travel from Haridwar to Nepal because there is a place in Muktinath, which is still there as a spot where near bank of river Gandaki, where Bharat Maharaj came.
Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I made a good guess. Thank you. Okay. So he was thinking like that. And then gradually, as you would expect, he became completely attached to the young deer. And he was always constantly thinking about it or of it very affectionately. As the deer grew up, it became Maharaj Bharat's constant companion. And he was always taking care of it. And to the degree that he would actually sometimes pick him up and place on his shoulders and carry it around, just like sometimes fathers carry their children around. Again, just like child, he'll keep the deer on his lap or on his chest when sleeping. I mean, just imagine. And gradually, he became so absorbed in thinking about the deer that his mind became totally agitated. As was said already, and as you can also imagine, that the more he became attached to the deer, the slacker his devotional service became. And it's really ironic that he is the person who gave up his kingdom with no hesitation, not a second thought, but that person became attached to the deer. And thus he fell down from his devotional practice. And that's what happens. So once the deer wandered off somewhere, and Maharaj Bharat or King Bharat realized that the deer was nowhere around. And he became very disturbed, and he immediately got up and started searching for the deer. And he was going everywhere, calling for him, looking for him, searching and lamenting at the same time, that the deer was no longer with him, what happened. And he was kind of absent-minded looking for him, that he, so much so that because of the mountainous area, he fell down. Like physically fell down, not spiritually. Spiritually had already fallen down. Fell down and he died. But as he lay dying, his mind was still fully absorbed in thinking about this deer at the time of death. So if he was thinking about the deer at the time of death, what kind of body do you think he got next?
Deer.
Dear body.
Deer, yes. Deer's body. And but there was a saving grace. He was so how do I say it? He was so advanced spiritually that even when he gave up his human body and took a deer's body, he didn't forget his spiritual knowledge. There's a verse in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, I think it's 41. Neha Vikram Nashosti Prithivayo na Vidite. That this devotional service, it never goes away. It's never reduced. It's never destroyed. So it stayed with him. And because of that, in the body of the deer, he remembered his previous life. And because he remembered his previous life, he also remembered his previous activities, past activities of being a devotee, being a king, and becoming attached to the deer. And he could understand how he had fallen down from his exalted position of such an advanced devotee to now in the body of a deer. And remembering this, he actually left his mother deer and he came back to the Pula ashram where King Bharat was staying or living when he died. And he stayed there for a while, and finally he was released from the body of the deer. And now next birth, he took from the womb of the wife of a very pure and self-realized Brahmin. He had a twin sister and 9 stepbrothers. Okay, so let's see, 9, 16. Okay, now this time he was in the body of a human being, and he could also remember his 2 previous lives by Krishna's mercy. So therefore, he did whatever he could to avoid being influenced by the association of materialistic people. And he said to himself, the best way I can do that is by acting like a deaf and dumb person, so others won't talk to him. And this time he was determined not to fall down again. He said, I screwed up once, I don't want to screw up again. So therefore he did not mix up with anybody who was not a devotee. And I was thinking that that's what Lord Chaitanya also told us in Chaitanya Charitamrita. He says, Asat Sangha Tyaga Ei Vaishnava Achara, which means that a devotee should strictly avoid the company of non-devotees, even if they are family members. So he was doing the same thing. He was avoiding all the family members except his father, who were not devotees. So now, King Bharat was in the body of a Brahmin. And this time he didn't care that his neighbors thought he was crazy. He was a dull person, because in his heart he was always remembering Krishna, and his mind he was always chanting Krishna's name. So his father actually really cared for him, and he tried to teach him, from the Vedas and other scriptures. And he performed many purificatory, ceremonies, the sanskaras. So, but he just was not interested. Like, he gave him the sacred thread, but King Bharat, I should say Bharat, did not want to have anything to do with any of this. He was just interested in chanting Krishna's name and thinking about Krishna all the time. So he remained fully Krishna conscious, but totally rejected anything that his father was trying to do for him. Excuse me. So, and he stayed silent. So a lot of this, what you would call uncivilized people, they mistook his silence for lack of intelligence. And they started teasing him so many different ways, and they called him Jada Bharat. Does anybody know the meaning of the word Jada?
With no brains.
I'm sorry?
Foolish.
Foolish, yeah.
I heard foolish. What else? My wife is something that doesn't move.
Not
You know,
Not so intelligent or with no brain.
actually, the two
Jad means
words.
material.
I'm sorry.
Jad means material.
It
Jad
doesn't
vastu
mean
is
that,
a
but it implies that. So there are two words, Jad and Chetan. Chetan means conscious.
Yeah. No,
So
no
Jad
conscious.
basically means not conscious.
No conscious.
So like, which comes back to the same point you were making, that not intelligent, but so much not intelligent, it's almost like not conscious. There's like zero intelligence. So they start calling him, you're so unintelligent, you're Jad. And your name is Bharat, so Jad Bharat. But he didn't care. He said, you can call me whatever you want, Jad Bharat is fine. Well, after some time, not 100 million years, but few years, his parents died. I shouldn't say his parents. His own mother and father died, but his stepmother and stepbrothers were still around. And they started to treat him even worse than before, very, very poorly. They simply could not appreciate his exalted position. They just didn't get that at all. They kept thinking he's just Jada. So they would give him, the kind of food that even an animal would not eat. Broken rice, oil cakes, or any grains that had been eaten, half eaten by the worms, or, when you cook something, sometimes at the bottom the grains are burnt and they get stuck to the bottom. So they take those grains, burnt grains, and give it to him. But he didn't care. He didn't mind. Whatever you give me is fine. Like, he was not enjoying the taste for it of it. He was just taking it because he wanted to keep or he needed to keep the body and soul. That's the only reason he was doing it. And he remained absorbed in Krishna consciousness. His brothers tried to give him many different tasks, till the field, plow the field, do this, do that. But because his mind was always in Krishna, not on the task he was given, he didn't do a good job of any of those. So they got really tired of him saying, such an idiot. And he said, okay, all you can do is just guard the paddy fields. So they had the boundaries there, so just stay there at the boundary and make sure no animals come to eat the crops. So he started doing that. So all night he'll stay out and watch the paddy fields. One night, there was a dacoit party, like a bunch of dacoits. Their chief wanted to have a son. So he decided he was going to make a human sacrifice to goddess Kali, for which he needed a man. So they found a man, but somehow he released himself and took off. So now in a hurry, they needed another person. So he sent a bunch of his associates to look for another person. They saw Jad Bharat and they grabbed him and forced him to come with him. Jad Bharat didn't protest, he said whatever. He didn't even ask any questions. They took him to their place, they gave him a bath, they gave him new clothes to dress in, they decorated him with ornaments, but not human ornaments, ornaments that you'd normally put on an animal. And they smeared his body with scented oils and all those kind of things, and they fed him very nicely. And then they took him in front of the goddess Kali, the deity of Kali. And then they started offering bhoga to the deity of Kali. They did the arti and they were singing bhajans, Kali bhajans, whatever they are. And they made Jad Bharat sit in front of the deity. Jad Bharat just stayed quiet and very calm and collected, didn't protest, didn't look like he was trying to run away, didn't look like he was concerned about what's going on, wasn't worried about being killed. He just sat there, eyes half closed, thinking about Krishna. Then the chief priest of the dacoits came to make the sacrifice, the human sacrifice. He had a chopper, which is a big sword. He took it out and raised his hand to chop the head off Jad Bharat. Well, goddess Kali was right there in the deity form, witnessing everything. And she got extremely alarmed that these guys are going to kill a pure devotee of Krishna. And she said, I cannot tolerate this. And the deity burst, and immediately she came out. The goddess Kali herself came out of the deity. And she was burning with anger. She was like, eyes were red, fire coming out of her eyes. she flashed her eyes and displayed her crooked teeth. And then she assumed a very frightening body, leaped violently from the altar, snatched the chopper off the hand of this chief priest, and cut his head off. And then she cut off the head of all the dacoits. And then her associates came, and all of them started playing with the heads, severed heads of these dacoits, just like, we have played football or soccer, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to pause for a second and ask you a question. What's the moral of this story?
First, we should always be in association of devotees.
No, I'm talking about the story, the part of that sacrifice, human sacrifice.
That a pure devotee of Krishna is favored by the demigods as well, because goddess Kali saved him.
Very good. Yes. What else?
About the case.
No, it's not Krishna. Lord Shiva.
Krishna protects his devotees.
Okay. Yes. What else?
Even the demigods will come to protect you if you are a Krishna devotee, because Ma Kali.
So I'm going to rephrase that. I like what you said, but I'm going to rephrase that. If you are a Krishna devotee, Krishna will somehow or the other protect you.
Protect you. Okay.
Rakshishyati iti vishwaso. That's one of the 6 processes of surrender. Have firm faith. Krishna will protect me. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said, what did he say? Rakhibe Krishna mareke, marebe Krishna rakheke. If Krishna wants to kill you, nobody can save you. But if Krishna wants to save you, nobody can kill you. Have that faith. Krishna is my best friend, Krishna is my protector. I don't have to worry about him. Okay? And the second part of the moral of the story is that those who harass the pure devotee are ultimately punished by the Lord, by Krishna. So Krishna does not leave these people alone. He punishes them. How dare you harass my devotee? Okay. I'm running out of time here. I'm going to be about 15 minutes late. So I'm in overtime. So I hope that's okay. If not, if you need to leave, that's fine. Okay. So Jad Bharat, actually, King Bharat, formerly King Bharat, he calmly returned as if nothing has happened to his village and resumed his activity of looking after the paddy field. Well, then time went by. Then one day it just so happened that there was a king of Sindhu. His name was Rahugana. He was on his way to Kapil Ashram. And Sonam, guess what he was on? A palanquin. Can you say palanquin? I'm sorry, this is a...
Palanquin.
Okay, so he was being carried in a palanquin by a bunch of servants. And when they reached this village where Jad Bharat was living, they realized they need one more palanquin carrier. So they need to hire somebody. So they looked around the village. They found Jad Bharat sitting by himself. They grabbed him and said, come with us. And they literally hired him on the spot with no money, of course, no pay, of course. And said, okay, your job is to help us carry the palanquin of the king. So he said, okay, fine. I mean, as if no reaction, nothing. He started walking with them. No protest, nothing. Just took the job and he started doing that, carrying the palanquin. But something interesting was happening. The palanquin was shaking like anything as when he started carrying with the other guys. And the king was, of course, being disturbed. So he started yelling at the carriers. And they said, sir, it's not our fault. This is a new guy. He doesn't know what he's doing. So basically what was happening was that as Jad Bharat was walking, he was very conscious of the ants on the ground. And he was very careful to see that he did not step on an ant. So if there was an ant passing by, he'll either try to jump across or just stop. In the process that everybody else is walking, the palanquin will shake, which caused the king to become very angry. So he started to chastise Jad Bharat, and he got really sarcastic. And he said, "Oh, my dear brother, you must be tired from carrying this palanquin. You're carrying it alone without any assistance for such a long time or for such a long distance. And I can see that you're very old. You're not very strong or stout. And listen, tell me if your other carriers are not cooperating with you. And Jad Bharat understood what's happening, but he didn't care. He was totally on the spiritual platform, no bodily conception. So he did not protest, just kept walking. But he kept walking the same way as before, so the palanquin kept shaking. So the king became even more angry and said, "You rascal, what are you doing? Are you dead? Even though you can speak and walk? Don't you know that I am your master? And you're disregarding me and you're not carrying out my order? How dare you? For your disobedience, I'm going to punish you like Yamraj punishes sinful people. I shall give you proper treatment so that you will come to your senses and do the correct thing." So now Jad Bharat had enough. So he started to talk. And he said, "My dear king, whatever you have spoken sarcastically is true. It's certainly true. There's no contradiction in your statements because as a spirit soul, I'm not my body. And therefore, I'm not the carrier of the palanquin. The body is. And I have not labored carrying the palanquin because my body has. I'm totally detached from my body. And when you say I'm not very stout and strong, you're right, because the body can be stout, fat or thin, but the soul is not fat or thin. And therefore, whatever you've said doesn't apply on me. You're right." And then he said, "You accuse me of being dead, even though walking and talking, as in alive." He said, "All I can say to you is that your accusation is not unnecessary, because everything material, including my body, has a beginning and end. It's temporary. So therefore, it was an unnecessary accusation. And as far as you're thinking that you are the king and the master, and you're trying to order me, that's not right. Because you should understand that your position and my position, they're both temporary. Today you're the king, I'm your servant. But tomorrow I may be the king and you may be the servant. Today you are ordering me, tomorrow I will be ordering you. Anyway, I don't want to get into this. If you think you're the master and I'm your servant, order me. Tell me, what can I do for you?" And he didn't stop. He said, "My dear king, you call me a rascal. You call me dull and crazy. And you want to punish me to bring me to my senses? So let me tell you that I may live like a dull, deaf and dumb person, but actually I'm a self-realized person. What will you gain by punishing me? If you really think I'm a madman, then you should also know that you cannot cure a madman by punishment. And the self-realized person does not need a cure." Like very boldly he spoke. The king heard. The king heard everything. And he understood right away that he has offended a great, learned and saintly person. So he got off the palanquin right away and humbly and respectfully prayed to Jad Bharat. And now he wanted to understand the deep meaning of the philosophy that Jad Bharat was espousing. And so with great sincerity, he said, "Please forgive me." And he said, "I accept that if somebody offends the lotus feet of a devotee of Krishna, he falls down from his position." And then he went on. I mean, it's a long dialogue, but he was basically trying to argue for a little while with Jad Bharat. This was kind of funny because he was apologizing and at the same time contradicting whatever Jad Bharat had said. And then he said, you know what, I'm not sure I really quite understood, so please start all over again. So Jad Bharat said, you know, you talk like you know what you're talking about. You seem very proud of your knowledge, but in my opinion, you're not very experienced. Just like Krishna told Arjun, Pragavadasya Bhasha in chapter 2. And he said to King Jad Bharat that you need to understand a person on transcendental platform is social behavior. Somebody is making too much noise. Hold on. Let me mute everybody. Yeah, I'm sorry, that becomes very distracting. So he says a devotee or somebody on a transcendental platform doesn't much care about the social norms, social behavior, especially the kind that sacrifices spiritual advancement. Because social behavior is basically karma kanda, and devotees are not interested in karma kanda because we cannot advance spiritually by karma kanda activities. So therefore, a devotee constantly keeps his mind absorbed in devotional stuff, whereas a materialistic person, karma kandi, his mind is always absorbed in material things, and therefore they keep going up and down in different bodies and suffering life after life. They don't understand they need to control their mind. The only way you can control that is through the spiritual activities. And by not doing that, they forget that they are this body, their spirit soul. And forgetting that, they also forget that they are servants of Krishna, and that service of Krishna is only business, and therefore they stay entangled in the material world. And that's what you're doing. Well, Jad Bharat was not sure he really understood. So, I'm sorry, King Raghugana was not sure he understood what Bharat said. So he asked him to clarify again. So this time, Jad Bharat clarified even more clearly, and he said that all living entities, moving or unmoving, are simply transformations of earth in different ways, although they can have different names. So, and he gave examples of, you can have a pot, a clay pot, which is basically clay, but looks different because of transformation. Just similarly, you have the body of a king right now. You become very proud, but that body of a king is also another transformation of earth, just like my body is. But because of your false ego, you are misbehaving towards me and other palanquin carriers and other living entities. And therefore, you're not even fit to be a king. How can you protect the living entities whom you're mistreating? And therefore, you should actually give up your role as a king and stop doing all these mental concoctions and all those kind of things. And then Jad Bharat told him about his previous lives and said that by Krishna's mercy, I still remember everything. And because of that, I'm being very cautious. And therefore, that's why I was acting like a deaf and dumb man. So I won't have to mingle with people in the material world. Because the association with material things is very powerful. And having had one bad experience, I don't want to do this again. I don't want any material association. But then he felt compassion towards king, and he explained to him this material world is like a forest where you get entangled. You may recall from chapter 15, where you get entangled, not understanding, the size of the tree, the different fruits on the tree, and you start to enjoy them and become entangled in that forest, don't know how to get out. That brings us to the close of tonight's class. Sorry, I was 10 minutes over time. He helped King Raghugana revive his Krishna consciousness. Pure Devotees Association always does in that. King Raghugana's illusion was over. He was again apologized to Bharat for his misbehavior, and then he was on his way.
Raghugana was deer in that previous life, that same deer. the Hugula king was that same deer that Jadbharat was so attached to in his previous life.
Oh, my wife is saying that she read somewhere that King Rahugana was the deer that King Bharat had become attached to. So I didn't know that. That's something new. Anyway, so comments, questions?
Prabhuji, why did King Bharat just behave like deaf and dumb instead of spreading the spiritual, what do you say?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. There's an expression in English. It says, once burnt, twice shy. In Hindi, the same thing says, दूध का जला छाछ को भी फूक फूक के पीता है, which means that, you know, I made a mistake once, I don't want to be even anywhere close to making that mistake again. So he said, if I avoid materialistic people completely, I will be never in any danger of becoming attached to them. So he said, just total avoidance.
That means he is not sure enough that if he comes into contact, he can't concentrate completely on this.
Well, that's why I said once burnt, twice shy. Yes, he could, but I don't want to take that chance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Prabhuji,
Thank you.
I had a question.
Yes, Vallabhari Prabhu, go ahead.
I think Mataji answered that. My question was that when Jad Bharat had to, he faced so much of pains and so much of stress given by the step parents and then by the dacoits and by so many other cases, but finally he became compassionate to King Raghuna. So why he chose to be compassionate? So maybe like Mataji answered that that king was the king was the deer in the past life. So maybe this is the answer to it.
Well, it could be, but I would have answered it differently, which is that a devotee is compassionate by nature. Par dukhe dukhi, as the expression goes, that he is he becomes compassionate to people who are in misery, and he realizes that all the people in the material world are very miserable, and King Raghuna certainly was because of his lack of knowledge. So he became very compassionate upon him and gave him the real knowledge, which brought him back to the devotional platform.
But yeah, that's the same question. That so why didn't he show his compassion to the step parents, to those dacoits?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Simply from the fact that they had his association and they served him without even realizing, they must have benefited. It's not mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But if I had to guess, I would say they must have benefited and they probably became pure devotees either in that life or next life. Because that much of association and service to a pure devotee cannot be without results.
But weren't they doing offenses also along with the pure devotional service?
Yeah, but remember, if the devotee forgives, then everything is okay. So once again, we are speculating here because none of us described in Srimad Bhagavatam. We are speculating that that's probably what happened. Like he never got mad at them. He never, got angry with them. He never tried to take revenge. None of that. He just said, whatever you want.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Sure. Anybody else? Okay, then thanks so much. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I got about 13 minutes over time. But
thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you again for
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Raji. Hare Krishna.
everybody.
Thank you. Hare Krishna, sabko.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Mancha.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna. Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.